How much money do you think we should be spending to get prepared and to continue funding or not where we are?
Yeah, it looks like there's a compromise around $10 billion, which should be enough to fund the procurement of vaccines going into the fall and the continued procurement of the therapeutics, both the monoclonal antibodies as well as the small molecule drugs. These markets can be transitioned to normal commercial distribution. They just can't be transitioned abruptly. So I think if Congress ultimately wants to step back from funding the vaccine distribution in particular, they need to give a signal to the market that that's their intention and give a time frame in which they're going to do that. It takes at least 90 days for insurers to get coverage in place. And the other challenge here is that some of these products are still under an emergency use authorization. And so long as they're under an EUA, they can't be procured by Medicare Part D or by Part B. It would be difficult for Medicare Part B to procure them as well. So they need to be fully approved. And so some of the monoclonal antibodies, some of the vaccines, particularly for younger kids, are still under an emergency use authorization, as well as the small molecule drugs. So I think in time, they can step back and transition these markets to normal commercial distribution and get out of the business of buying and distributing these products. They just need to articulate what the time frame is to do that. And FDA does need to step in and fully approve these products at some point.
Doctor, if the funding is half of what we're talking about now, what does it mean for testing? You've talked a lot about some of these drugs working best or even working only, if you can get there early, meaning you need to test often. What does it mean for some of these vaccines and monoclonals in terms of just speed to market, what the fall and winter ultimately look like?
Yeah, look, the money that got cut, so there's speculation is there's a compromise around $10 billion. There had been a request for $15 billion. A lot of the cuts, the difference between the $15 billion that was requested and $10 billion that may get authorized, is money that would have gone towards global distribution of vaccines. But the bottom line is right now there are literally hundreds of millions of doses available for global distribution that aren't being pulled down by other countries because countries don't have the demand for vaccines. They don't have the ability, the distribution in place to make those vaccines available to their population. So it's not a supply issue anymore and a global vaccine issue. It's more of an on-the-ground distribution demand issue. So the money that's not going to get appropriated probably wouldn't have been used immediately anyway. In terms of the longer-term picture, the administration set forth in its budget and in its plan for pandemic planning a vision that they would continue to keep some of these production lines open, particularly around testing, where you'd continue to produce tests knowing that you're going to have to throw some away because the expiry date would come up on those tests, but they wanted to have a constant supply so that they didn't have a shortage in case there was another spike in cases right around a period of time when there was going to be a spike in demand, like the holidays, like we had last Christmas. I think that they're not going to have as much money to do that continued production. And what you don't want is some of these markets to respond to normal supply and demand signals where if their demand goes down, as it is right now because cases are falling, some of the manufacturers of the diagnostic tests pull back, start making less tests. And then as we go into the fall, demand picks up again. You don't have the testing available.